Will you bring me that sign-in sheet, please? I don't need the pen, but thanks.
All right, we good? All right, I would like to call to order the socially distanced May 18th Clinton Massaly Board of Education regular scheduled meeting. Carrie, would you call the roll?
Mr. Avery?
Here.
Mr. Goodall?
Here.
Mr. Gorman?
Here.
Mr. Lamb?
Here.
Mrs. Norman?
Here.
All right, would you all stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So just a note, ladies and gentlemen, you'll need to speak into it because we're not picking up it enough. Yeah.
Okay.
There you go.
How's that?
That is much better.
Okay, next item. Ooh, hot mic. Next item on the agenda is to approve the agenda. Do I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Any questions? Seeing none, Carrie, would you call the roll?
Mr. Avery?
Yes.
Mr. Goodall?
Yes.
Mr. Gorman?
Yes.
Mr. Lamb?
Yes.
Mrs. Norman?
Yes.
All right. Next item is to approve the minutes. Do I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Any questions? Seeing none, Carrie, would you call the roll?
Mr. Goodall?
Yes.
Mr. Gorman?
Yes.
Mr. Lamb?
Yes.
Mrs. Norman?
Yes.
Mr. Avery?
Yes.
All right, moving on to the treasurer's report. Carrie, the floor is yours.
Okay, I would like to request approval of the financial reports for April, including the financial activity checklist and investment report as presented. We didn't have any appropriation changes this month, seeing as how we were not in session. And the other thing is the approval of the 5-year forecast as presented. So let me talk through a little bit of that before we get going. I know, Mrs. Norman, you had mentioned one time about keeping the reports consistent so you can be able to see where the numbers change. This report is inconsistent with the rest of them. So if you look on board docs in your executive content, that regular monthly report is there so you can compare to your old ones if you want to. I just didn't print it out for this meeting.
Thank you.
So I do have a 5-year forecast report. You can feel free to look through all of that. But the highlights are basically on that Excel sheet that I printed out. If you want to look at the back packet there, that's where I'm going to discuss. So in November, we had approved a 5-year forecast that showed a deficit spending of $478,216. On the Excel sheet, we just rounded that to $450,000. Due to the 3% raise that we gave to our staff last year, the 26% increase in insurance, and then just the budgeting for this year. So since November, we've had to hire additional personnel. We had 3 long-term staff absences and a payout, and we had to pay them and the subs that entire time. We had some additional special ed costs. We had a month without a bus mechanic, so we had to send out all of our repairs and tow the buses out. And then we had some unexpected HVAC repairs with chillers going out. And so those are some additional costs. With our closure, this is April and May, and probably a little bit of March. We didn't really factor that in there when Mr. Baker and I were looking at this, but definitely April and May savings. Between fuel and electric, we'll save about $50,000, and on substitute savings, we'll save about $35,000. So those are to the good side there. And then last week, we were told that the governor was going to cut our state funding $344,020. We get 2 payments a month from the state. That's about that amount. So pretty much we're losing 1 foundation payment for the rest of the fiscal year, so through June 30th. And that is from the $300 million he's cutting from the education budget. Then he was going to cut an additional $55 million from some other line items, And so we're predicting to lose about 46,000 in that. We did not bill our spring sports since the season did not happen. And then with additional school fees, with us not being in session, sometimes that's far from parents' mind. So we're predicting a $56,000 loss there. I will say, as far as the regular school fees, that stays with them. And so, when we start next year, that school fee will be there. So, but the spring sports, we didn't bill those, so that's definitely a loss. So we're looking at our May forecast of being down $929,258 is what's on the back of that big 5-year forecast packet. So roughly $930,000 is what we are overspending this year. I will say this does not include any of the CARES funding that we've been given with our Title I monies, or our Title I determination, and based on what the state thinks our local wealth is, they've determined that we will get $153,000 in CARES funding. That revenue is not included in the forecast. Neither is the wellness money that we got this year, the $144,000. However, it does include the reduced expenditures to the general fund. So the $144,000 wellness dollars is not included in the revenue, but the expenditures are that much less due to the salaries that we're covering with that. So it's kind of included in there. And then just to kind of go on to our predictions for next year, that's at the bottom part of that page. We always predict a property value increase, a property tax increase. Ernie, who is worth Forecast 5 that we work with to do the 5-year forecast, he's predicting a 12% loss in income tax. He feels like that could be a little high. Right now, the OBM, that's the Ohio Business and Management numbers, the withholdings are down 9% for April. Again, it could get worse than that. It could get better, but he's predicting a 12% loss there. He's predicting still a 2.18% loss in state funding. That's what we had with that $344,000. Again, Mr. Baker and I kind of feel like that probably is going to be worse since it was just 2 months of this year and we got cut that much. But that's what he's predicting. In another webinar with Forecast 5, they said to predict between 10 to 20% cuts, but I mean, that's going to be just complete devastation if we do that. So we're going to stick with the 2.8 or 2.18% that we have now. And then a 9.5% in the other revenue. So that's, again, that $55 million he's going to cut with like catastrophic costs or transportation reimbursement. So probably between those two numbers, that will probably even out to the amount of state funding we're set to lose. We had already hired some positions for next year before this information came out, so we have some additional costs there. In this process this last week, we received the insurance costs for next year. So the medical insurance came in at a 7.5% increase, and we project a 7% increase each year. Dental and vision went up 2%. So we also predict a 7% increase in that, so that came in nicely there. Also, our employees are taking 2.5% more of their insurance, so that will help as well, and that was already factored into our projections. Our purchase services has increased for next year. We always do a 3% increase for that. And additional capital outlay, we are going to buy a bus. Hopefully the funding that the state said they're going to give us, the $36,000, hopefully that still stays and we do get that. And then again, with more equipment repairs, since we were hit with a lot of those this year, we were going to try to budget for them ahead of time. So that puts next year overspending by about $785,000. So with all of the uncertainty right now, I have to submit a 5-year forecast by the end of this month, but I'm always able to submit revisions. So as we finally close up the year and see kind of where everything is, if we want to change those projections, if we have more info by then, I can always submit a revision to the state. But I do need one approved to submit by the end of the month. This is your 5-year forecast. If there's anything you feel that you want me to adjust or change on here, I can definitely do that. So whatever thoughts, questions you have, feel free.
Yeah, I don't know, just a thought or comment. We're kind of in uncharted water here, so there's a lot of projections being thrown out. So we would fully expect this, I would assume, as a board to change probably month to month as we get more information either from the state or we see additional cuts. If that 10 to 20% does become real, obviously that's catastrophic to not only our district, but for multiple districts across the state. So this is just something I think as a board we'll have to keep an eye on as we go forward. Like I say, there's no pandemic playbook, and so this is something that it's very difficult to model. So again, I think you've done a great job kind of pulling this together, but I think we should fully understand that this could change, month to month. Certainly it's going to look probably different by next year. So something we'll have to really keep an eye on and see what the latest guidance is, and then try to build that in the projections.
Anybody else have anything?
No, I was just going to say that, so the Finance Committee met, and we'll give an update in the Superintendent's Committee report here in a little bit, but just to kind of tag along with what you said, I mean, just since here for that Finance Subcommittee meeting, the numbers have changed pretty drastically, so it's just very disheartening with everything that's going on that the cuts are coming from education, but like I said, we'll talk a little bit more. I've talked to Carrie today about the 5-year forecast, and I mean, obviously, it's very disheartening. If you asked if you could make any changes, can we make all the numbers not have brackets? That would be the change that I would request.
Yeah.
But if we
Remove
can't
all
do
numbers.
that, no, I mean, clearly this is every day this is probably going to change until the all the state funding and all those numbers come out. But I think this is our best stab at it right now.
So I have a question. I'm sure you're surprised. I always ask questions. So just from a process perspective, understanding how this works in education, because I'm still new to this, when we create something like this, what is the process, Matt and Carrie, for when, I mean, do you guys sit down and take it and start figuring out with a number this big where you're making adjustments? I know we kind of talked about some of the personnel moves in our personnel subcommittee. I know in finance in the past when I was on that committee, we kind of talked about little pieces of things. What is the plan, or how do you guys sit down and decide or start figuring out what the plan might be for different areas you need to be looking at?
Well, I say we met and discussed and tried to see what we could do right now, and then we figure with some guidance from you all this evening, kind of moving forward, we'll see, what ideas you guys have to present our ideas as well, and kind of look at it that way. So I send the numbers to Ernie every month. He updates them. It's now on a web-based system. So before he had a master spreadsheet with 55 tabs across the bottom. Now it's all a web-based version. So we can get in there and you can dig it down to, the actual account code. So we were in there looking and say, well, he has this, we kind of think this. So, we made some adjustments as well.
Are you guys able to get in there yourselves and play with percentages and all
Yes.
that? Okay, that's
yes.
what I thought.
Yep. We can do it by percentage. We can do it by a dollar amount change. Yes.
We actually took a probably even more conservative approach than what he took because and he respects this, we know the day-to-day, so we know that there's repairs that he isn't factoring. He hadn't put the bus in. There was a couple things that by digging down to that very account code level, that line item level, we felt we needed to increase that number to give a real projection so we know how much to cut. But I think to answer your question, what I think you're asking is about the process itself. Where I would start is direction from the board, and starting with the subcommittee on personnel and the entire board through, conversations, whether they be in the board session, through executive session, whatever the necessity is, to help us understand what's the number that, and I'll use a term loosely here, that we feel comfortable with. Knowing that, we'll start making reductions where we feel it's necessary, not replacing positions that are either due to attrition, retirement, and then we'll talk about some of those options, later tonight.
But not all we have other options besides personnel as well that we look at.
Absolutely. Yeah, we start with those budgets first. So for example, curriculum, technology, we'll say non-personnel, non-people areas without question are the first cuts. So, Mr. Moss and I have already met about reducing technology budget. I've met with the building principals and told them about, hey, curriculum might look a little different next year, obviously, because we've spent some of that money, we've allocated some of that money, but we have enough budgeted to where we can make a reduction. But absolutely, the problem is, and you're well aware of this, the number being that high, unfortunately, we don't get to that number without usually a personnel conversation at least.
Right. Separate question, the lunchroom stuff. How is that all rolling out with all the free lunches that came out, or, you know, the stuff that we were delivering, and how does that?
Right.
saw those
So
numbers look
we
rough.
delivered to all students, regardless if they were free and reduced or not. So we were refunded for some of that. And actually, for what we spent, I think she's coming out okay as far as what we spent to do those meals. However, we were paying her staff this entire time with no sale of lunches. So the CARES Act money that we're getting, that has to be spent by September 30th. Mr. Baker and I spoke, we can use that for, depending on what our setting is next year, more Khajiits to help with Wi-Fi in different places. We could extend our Wi-Fi. We can also use that money to essentially bail out the cafeteria to make them back at zero again. So again, I feel terrible because she was on the track. She was going to be positive this year for the first time ever, and now she's back in the hole. And pretty significantly, about $70,000 is what we're projecting with that. So that CARES money can be used to put her back to zero.
Yeah, I spoke to that gentleman specifically, and he said that transportation of food sources and the cost of that transportation is a direct replacement fund for that money. So you can say, yep, I spent this, and I'm reimbursing this.
Yeah.
Good use.
Yeah, I think from a board perspective, what we need to think of over the next couple months is strategy, obviously. I mean, some of these are pretty big numbers, but again, we end this year at, 2.6, almost 2.7 in the bank, which is within our 60 days cash on hand. But I think as we go through the next few months and as these numbers become more real, then, the board needs to have a strategy. So it's, do you take a hatchet to it and start making a bunch of cuts, or do we start to, make smart decisions, waiting for the numbers to become more real, and then decide if at that point we have to make massive cuts. So I don't think we have to have that strategy in place tonight, but I think through some of the committee work, obviously finance will play a big part in that, personnel also, to kind of help, Matt and Carrie guide us through this time. So, all right. Any other questions? All right, you've heard the treasurer's recommendation. Do I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Any questions? Seeing none, Carrie, would you call the roll?
Mr. Gorman?
Yes.
Mr. Lamb?
Yes.
Mrs. Norman?
Yes.
Mr. Avery?
Yes.
Mr. Goodall?
Yes.
All right, moving on to the public participation, administrative reports, and recognitions. So with that, I'll turn it over to Matt. I don't see any recognitions or presentations, so we'll move on to administrative reports. Sorry, we had a disinfection of the mic, so.
Okay, I'm gonna touch this. Okay, hi. Hope you guys are doing okay. This is I'm used to virtual meetings, but this is different. Okay, well, I said this in my April board report, but I thought it was still true, so I kept it in here. But just during this unprecedented time, I've been nothing but impressed with our community and our staff. We've all been working collaboratively with a positive mindset, although it has been messy and a bit unnerving, to make an understatement, and stressful. I believe that the emergency remote learning instruction we have delivered to our families has been successful. And actually, not only do I believe that, but I've sent out a survey to our community, and I have received quite a bit of feedback, and so far it was all positive. There were a couple suggestions, and then I've shared in here, I'm going to be having a virtual coffee hour as well. Next week on Thursday to see if, what other suggestions they would have depending on what setting that we may be in the fall, to start kind of prepare for that. And actually a parent said that's really positive. I hope you keep this even if we are in a brick and mortar situation, because I can't always make the coffee hours. So that was a positive or a silver lining in this situation. Our teachers I'm kind of like a proud mom. Our teachers have gone above and beyond to meet the needs of our students. They've been flexible and empathetic with all of our different student needs, and they've just remained positive. In all my leadership meetings and all my staff meetings, it's been nothing but positive, no complaining at all, except that they miss their kids. And then in return, our parents have been very patient with us as well. So I've always been proud to be Clinton Massey's principal, elementary principal, and lead learner, but even more so now. So we had the communication hub. That was something that the BLT created in February, but I'm really glad that we had that because that's been a way that all of our parents can go there and know that's where they get all their information. Something that we discussed at length were report cards for the third trimester. We decided as a leadership team that due to all the different needs at home, that we were only going to assess and report for the first month of the third trimester. We were actually in a brick and mortar setting, so we felt that was fair, it was equitable. And then for the rest of the semester, we decided to mark it as remote learning, or RL, for any standards that we addressed within the remote learning. So then we weren't unfair, because we have all the way to kindergarten, might not have parents to help them, or even my 5th graders, if they didn't have me there to support them, I'm not sure they would have been able to get it all completed. Something that we've also been continuing, even in the remote setting, is our language arts and science curriculum team. And I can't thank you enough. The curriculum teams have been pivotal in our curriculum this year. I'm very happy to have that committee established. Our language arts, we actually are excited. We're still going to be able to have the Orton Gillingham training here on campus. We've worked with the company to make sure we're abiding by all the CDC guidelines, and we've also made sure our staff, if they're not comfortable, they don't have to come, but they were all ready and willing to be on campus to learn hands-on. So we'll be having that in the elementary cafeteria the first week in June. That's our 3rd through 5th grade teachers will be here, just language arts. So we have them sitting at the cafeteria tables, one at a table, making sure they're equally 6 foot apart and spaced, and their materials will be packaged up separately, so we won't be sharing those materials. And then the next training, the K2, will be in the 2nd week in July. So we're excited to have that continuing. The curriculum map, we were updating those, if you recall. We have the comprehension piece done for the 5 pillars. We'll update the rest once we get the training. The teachers wanted the training before we move on. Science is also moving in the right direction. We have a scope and sequence. It had kind of been an afterthought at the elementary school. Science had been, reading and math was the priority, but now with more of a STEM focus at our elementary, that is definitely, I'm excited to see what our kids are going to be exposed to in regards to science for next year. We have continued to have leadership meetings every week, TBT meetings every week, to working together. As you know, ODE has waived state testing and the 3rd grade reading guarantee parameters, so it was a local decision. We had some of our lowest numbers this year in regard to students we were concerned about, so we are, at this point, I would not support any retentions. Mrs. Bailey will continue to work with the 3rd grade team within the RTI process to support any of our students who may be struggling. Our title teachers, if you go to our communication hub, they've even created videos with our Hegarty's and Orton Gillingham videos to support parents, so you can even check those out. Let's see. Oh, if you hadn't had a chance, Mr. Howard and the specials team created the virtual field day. It was really fun. My kids actually participated, and Carter was even like, I haven't got sweaty, so that he had a good job, and they were competing. So I'm really glad that, they thought through that and thought outside the box and kept that going, because that was really something. If you haven't seen the t-shirts, they're hilarious. It says, just roll with it, and it says 2020, and the zeros are toilet paper. It was great. Carter only has me and his grandma on there, I've signed it, but, we'll get back one of these days and get it signed. So that was good that they kept that going. Massey Moving Up Day, we usually have in the brick and mortar setting. Our students get to actually meet their next year's teacher. I think we started that 2 or 3 years ago. It just releases a lot of anxiety for our kids moving and leaving their teachers, and therefore the parents, they don't want their kid to be worried. So that email went out today, or dojo message went out today, so they'll know who their child's teacher will be for the 2021 school year. Human resources, first of all, I'd just like to say thank you for the all-day kindergarten. Keep continuing that, and having 7 teachers on board, will be phenomenal. And now and then the class sizes in 2nd grade were huge. We had like 28 in a class, which is 2nd grade. I'd be lining them up for lunch. They'd be from here all the way to the end. That is a lot of young students in a classroom, so I'm very thankful to have an additional 2nd grade teacher to meet the needs of our kids. Because if you've ever taught elementary, I know, Hattie's research says that it all has to do with teacher, which is correct, but also class size definitely impacts instruction. So we're happy to have that. So we are getting Laura Godart back. She was AKA Laura Darcy. She'll be coming back for our 4th grade / 2nd grade intervention specialist. She was a phenomenal asset to this district. She does drive 45 minutes, so she got a job closer to home, but she missed it so much and really loves the culture in our building and wants to come back. So I'm excited to have her back on staff. Let's see. I mentioned the virtual coffee hour. We're having that, and actually I have it scheduled for May 28th. And then our PTO helped us celebrate Virtual Teacher Appreciation Week with some gift cards. So I was very thankful for that. And just again, thankful for our families. We've actually kept the Sensory Garden Committee going virtually. So thanks to Stacia Rumbarger, she led a hugely successful candy bar fundraiser. So I'm actually in the process of communicating with the company. The goal of that fundraiser was to buy a sensory or a garden or a shade sail over our sensory garden because it's a little sun back there. So we're looking to get that installed this summer, and that's all through the candy bar fundraiser. So thanks to our families also for selling thousands of candy bars. We also have created a Sign Up Genius, so the community can still be involved with our sensory garden, something educational and community to continue our pollinator gardens. And we had a lot of people sign up within the first day. So it's exciting, and that's still their sign-up possibilities. So, and then we didn't get to have our staff picture, so we created Bitmojis. Jill Borton at our BLT meeting shared creating a virtual classroom. It's really neat, and so she helped our staff with that, and then so we have our staff picture virtually. So this will be one I'll never forget. It'll be up in my office there. So every year I keep up the pictures. So, any questions for me?
I've got one.
Okay, great.
You were talking about the, what do you call it when the kids learn their teachers' names moving up?
Massey Moving Up Day.
How is that working with the 5th graders to 6th? Is there some kind of orientation for them online?
You know, I'm not sure. I'm going to have to talk, because I know we had some questions, so I'm going to need to talk to Lorinda about that. We had a transition day planned for them to go visit, so I'll work with Lorinda to try to
It
get that
seems like
figured out.
last year we had a couple of teachers did like introduction videos or something, even though, I mean, it wasn't a virtual situation, but so some of the kids moving up
Yeah.
would get to see what it was like a little bit.
Yeah, I'll work on that with her. Now, we are creating the 5th grade teachers. We have a virtual 5th grade graduation because that's that's a really big deal. But we have created a slideshow, and Lorinda's part of that at the end. I'll share that with you all. We were planning on Thursday evening to do a virtual graduation, but because of the move, the rain, the weather today, we're going to just send that out as the slideshow to all of our parents. But I think that would be a good idea maybe on the 6th grade end. Maybe they could create a flip grid, because that's something also Miss Bailey worked for our teachers, is creating a flip grid as an introduction that we're going to send to each kid so they can kind of get to know their teacher as well. We were going to wave at them, a lot of our teachers were interested in coming up for the pickup day, but we also have a flip grid for those parents that couldn't make it for kids.
Thanks.
Good? Okay.
All right, thank you. Hold on, mic sanitization.